After the background is all done, then it's a matter of just rounding over. So we round over the vines, we round over the grapes, the leaves. Because the veins are deeper, we take the V-tool. That V-tool we run right on the veins. Those veins, the cut that we're making now, is like the stop cut. We take the gouge and we round down to the bottom of the stop cut. This is a number 3 gouge. The lines that the V-tool made here on the veins are quite harsh, and I'm just softening them, rounding them a little bit. So the thing that I'm concentrating on is the shape of the leaf, where the stem is coming in and really joining to the bottom of the leaf here, which is the deepest part normally of the grape leaf. And then how the vines run out and how things are rounded down to the vine. And you want to show some variation. So some of the leaves you will see that I have dips in and curled differently, just to create interest so they're not all identical. So you're just playing with the shapes, making some convexed, concaved. And you're trying to make it look like the leaf is thin. So the type of bends and folds are natural on the leaf, and what would be significant of a thin type of a leaf. Now for the grapes, a V-tool, or not a V-tool, a fishtail gouge. This is a number 3 fishtail gouge, and I love the fishtail to get into these corners. When I am down in here, let me pull the light down a little bit more here so we can see it a little bit better. But how that corner gets to the deepest part. And if you don't have a fishtail and you're just using a regular number 3 like this here, what I did, this wasn't a fishtail, I just ground the sides down to make a fishtail out of it. But if you don't want to do that with your gouge, then you can use a skew chisel to get down in there. Now this skew chisel is a number 1 chisel. It's straight, but it's on an angle this direction. And that point will get right down into the bottom areas too. So you can do it with a gouge that is not a fishtail with the straight sides, rounding all the tops of the grapes. You smooth it. I just like using a number 3 for it. You might have a preference for using, like this is a number 8 sweep, and it with that curve on it, it matches closer to the shape of the grape. So you just might like this a little bit better. It's more tool specific. I just like those number 3s. That's just my personal preference. But if you're closely matching it, you can see how nicely it smooths more of the grape, so you get less of the lines on there because you're rounding it closer to the shape. There is no rules for sharpening tools. There would be, let's say if you were going to be doing a lot of these grapes, what you might consider is taking this here gouge like this number 5, if this is the one you prefer for doing the rounding, and making that into a fishtail. Just grinding the sides in like I did on this number 3 gouge here. So you can do the same thing. The only thing to be mindful of is any fishtail, as you're using it up, it's getting narrower and narrower as you're coming down. So, but the length of time, this one I made years ago, and probably not even 1/8 of an inch off of there in 10 years, because all you're doing is buffing it to sharpen. Rarely do you need to take it to the grinding wheel. So be very careful if you're going to turn this into a fishtail or do any grinding on it. Use a lot of water. Don't build up the heat. Use a whetstone if you can, so that will keep the temperature down. Remember, 400 degrees will start changing the temperature, and 400 degrees isn't that high. You can generate that quite easily. So if you're going to do any grinding on a tool, be very careful of the heat. I've mentioned it before that I'm not really too particular about getting each and every one of these whiskers out of here at this stage of the game. When I'm carving, like say these whiskers, the big ones I want to make sure they're out of there. But the little ones like this here, I am not concerned about them. I will even put a coat of varnish on with those type of whiskers in there, and because I don't sand before my first coat of varnish, but what happens is the first coat of varnish shows the imperfections. It raises the grain, so you're going to have to do some sanding, and I use a 400 grit emery for sanding because I don't want to get rid of all my tool marks. So, but some sanding is necessary after you put the first coat of varnish on because it raises the grain. Now, if you're putting an oil finish on, which I don't use oils, but if you're putting oil finish on, then that should not raise the grain. So then no sanding is required. Then you have to be a little bit more careful with these little whiskers that they are all gone because if you're not going to sand between coats of finish. Also, I explained that I'm going to be recarving the background with a texture. I will be showing you that in a little bit here. Right now I'm just going around and I'm looking at the rounding of the leaves and the grapes, and I'm looking at the shadows, and I like to move my light around, so when I see that the shadows are looking pretty good with the position that the light is in now, then I will take that light and I will move it to another location to redirect the shadows. Now I can see more imperfections here. So things show up when you move the light. Natural light outside is the best. You can have a carving looking just super under the artificial light, and you take it outside and more imperfections just pop right out at you. So if you have a chance to work more in natural light, that is most ideal. Natural light being the sunlight. Now the vines have texture to it, so to put that texture in the vine, I'm going to use a V-tool and just kind of follow the vine, and I like to rock the tool. You'll see in some of my videos how I put different textures in by rocking the tools, but grapevines are not smooth. There is a texture to them. This is one way I start putting the texture on. These lines are pretty harsh, so this is just the first coat of texture right in that area. Then, and I'll put maybe where I've got some areas, like right in there. Try to cover it, all the surfaces, so there's no untextured surface. When you are smoothing out rounded objects for tool-specific carving, you select a tool with a little larger radius than the object that you're carving. That way the corners of the tool won't be digging in, so it's just easier to control. We're at the point in the picture that we're kind of cleaning up the object. We're putting in textures. You can see some of the textures that I've got here. This is one leaf that's turned upside down. You can see the veins, where this one here, the veins are sunk in. The thing that you want to do is get some interest in the shapes. This particular vine here, grapevine, needs some texture in, so adding that using a V-tool. And the V-tool that I'm using is about a 60 degree, and I like that a little bit better because when I rock it side to side, the side wings dig in a little bit quicker than if I was to use one that was, let's say, a 45 degree. I would have to rock it further side to side to make the side wings cut. Now once I add in the grooves, the main grooves of the vine, I'm trying to make it look like a grapevine, and a grapevine has got quite a bit of texture to it. But it's not as harsh as what I'm doing here, so I'm going to refine it. So the next step is to go back with a, I'll take this number 3 fishtail gouge, and I will just rock it, and you can see the little chips coming off, but how it's kind of refining and softening up those heavy textures that I did with the V-tool. So to put your textures in, you normally need more than one technique. So you put your main texture in, and then you go back and you refine it. And that adds a little bit more interest, like a grapevine. I will just dress this one here up a little bit more. We're also at the process that we're starting to smooth down the background. I mentioned earlier we're going to texture this background, and I will be showing you that, but I don't need the background really smooth, but I want a lot of the whiskers cleaned up because we're going to be adding some vertical lines, and something like this, just need to flatten that out a little bit more. One of the best tools for cleaning up I found is the V tool, and again that one with the 45-degree angle on it is, or 60-degree angle rather, and there you can go right up next to the edge of the object and also kind of skim the background at the same time. Cleans up a lot of the whiskers. I'm kind of laying the V-tool on the side, having one of the wings drag right on the background. Here I can't because it's a little bit too narrow. And then you take that edge of the V-tool and go right up next to the object while you're skimming the background. When painting or carving a picture, you normally have a focal point. It's like a story with a plot. You are building up the rest of the picture, and your point, the highlight of the plot is your highlight of the picture. Unlike a mantle, where a mantle is like a storyline, it doesn't have a plot. And it just kind of moves along, and all the different characters in your storyline are the objects. So in this case here, one of the supporting roles is going to be your vine. And it's kind of in the background. It does take on a supporting role, but it's not the main character. The main character are the leaves playing against the grapes, the two different shapes. So when you're building this storyline, the different characters should be of interest. So the grapes in this case here are different sizes, they're at different levels, nice rounded, all very similar, so more of the interest is in the construction of all the grapes together as a group, where the leaves are kind of individuals. And they should be all different, just like your characters in a storyline are different. And so like this one here, it's smaller, it's going in more. This is flatter, it's got a lot of nice bends to it. This is flatter, and it's just kind of highlighting the vines. And the background, when we texture that, will have the least significant role. I'm going to put the lines going this way in the background that you will see shortly, and that will add to the movement we've got going across. It'll just accentuate the movement going across the map. So we're right now refining the different shapes. I am moving the light around so I can see my shadows differently. I need to round those grapes off more, and just getting to the point where we're finishing up the foreground, and then I am going to add into that background, that texture that's going vertical. So when you're rounding, all you're doing is looking at the different facets. So like the facets that are created here by the two different cuts, and you're just trying to round it. So everything will be rounded. You're getting rid of all the different facets. So I'm using this chisel. It's a number 5 chisel. I'm using it upside down so the curve is going around the grape, and that just helps me in that rounding action. So it minimizes these lines. I want to get a nice smooth curve with no lines on it. And about the time when I think I've got the lines pretty well gone on some of the grapes, I'll move the light and it'll create some more lines. So I shift it all over until I'm pretty sure that it looks good from all different light angles. To get down into the corners between the grapes is the I like that fishtail number 3 gouge. I use that a lot. And it was a straight gouge that I just ground into a fishtail, so the sides were fairly straight going out, and I just kind of made a fishtail out of it. But those corners, they fit well down in there, and it also helps the rounding action because I'm using the chisel again upside down, and I'm just poking those corners in there to clean them whiskers out of there. A couple of the things I don't really put a lot of importance on is the direction of the vines to make them all, to where they're really going someplace. I put them behind, I make them believable. But let's say here, this vine, it might end here, this one might come up here, or in your mind it might continue through. Doesn't make any difference. I normally don't pay too much attention to the thickness of the vine, but here we're coming to the end. This vine is pretty thick and clunky, so I'm going to thin it down a little bit because it's coming to the end of its journey here at the end of the mantle, and we should make it a little bit more like it's going to end. And I'm still trying to follow the curves, the natural curve of the vine. One of the nice things here, the exciting part about doing something like this, is using your imagination. Let's say on these curlicues, that for me is very exciting, coming up with something like that. Just doing the different shapes of the leaves. Let's say these two leaves here look pretty similar, and maybe I think I want to create a deep shadow above here, so we will make a deeper stop cut. And then just kind of get that curve. So one side of the leaf is concave, and the other side down here, maybe I'll try to keep it convexed. Smooth it over and see how that looks. So you're developing the different characters in the story here, and each character is different, and each one should have its own interest. looks kind of like a baseball glove, almost like a catcher's mitt, where it's going to catch your interest right into this area here and then start you on the flow. I think that's coming a little bit better now. If I just kind of smooth that and refine that shape a little bit, that looks quite a bit different than this one. They look like they complement each other. It's just using your imagination and just having fun with it. This is a very nice journey. And we move the lights around a little bit more. And this is the background, these vertical lines that I'm putting in right now. So if you see the difference between here without the background and there with the background, what it does is it darkens this slightly because it's not flat and it doesn't reflect the light straight out. The light is reflected at different angles. So it absorbs more light. So it looks like they're more protruding, or that the background is deeper. The other thing it does is, and I feel this is just my opinion on this, because many people would consider this to be an acceptable background here, but I just want it to stand out more. I think these lines here, making it stand out more, enhances the movement. So now to put this background in, all I'm doing is making vertical lines coming down. I'm not trying to do them very straight like with a ruler, but I'm trying to do them fairly uniform, and I don't want it to look mechanical. The chisel that I'm using is a number 6 sweep, fairly narrow chisel, and it just fits the curve. In these areas here, I just kind of nibble getting in there like that. They're not going to be really nice, straight, uniform lines. It's just basically a texture. And it's probably the least amount of importance in the things that are carved. So it's just kind of enhancing it just a little bit. The other thing that it does is it does add some more interest, because you don't really see this too often. But I don't need to go and smooth that background down very much, because I can finish it off with just these nice lines. So one of the things that I do is I take a brush, an old brush, and I just scrub the surface, and that gets a lot of the little whiskers and that out of there before I varnish it. So now it's ready for varnish. So what I'm using is the Minwax, the Helmsman. It's the spar urethane. It's an indoor-outdoor, and it's a clear satin. That's my preference. I'm applying it with a bristle brush. It's important to use a bristle brush so it can drag the varnish and not slide through it. It pulls the varnish, pulls all the bubbles out of it. Also, it's a disposable brush. I've used this brush 3 or 4 times, and the more you use it, the less bristles that it loses. On these first coats, I'm not worried at all about the bristles coming out, because I just take and pick the bristles right off the surface. But a good brush, this would not be very good for, because I'm scrubbing it. I'm pushing it into the surface, and I'm scrubbing it around into the corners. So that's would be very hard on an expensive varnish brush. Now, as I'm putting the varnish on, I'm looking for little imperfections that maybe I can carve right now while the varnish is wet, or if I miss it, then I can carve it after the varnish dries. So I'm dabbing the excess up so I can see what it looks like. Making sure all the surfaces are covered on the sides and that too. Noticing a little area here that could use a little touch-up. So right when the varnish is wet, I go in there, and I'm not worried about getting all the chips out of there, because I'm going to be varnishing it again and going over it, smoothing it down with some sandpaper and doing a little bit more carving on it. Here's the finished mantle. It is 7 foot long.